Hi, everybody. That's it's a cliche. Welcome. My name is Jené Jackson, and this is an outgrowth of a book that I wrote. One of the most famous quotes about writing is by Margaret Mitchell. She wrote Gone with the Wind, and she says, "In a weak moment, I have written a book." And it feels like that sometimes. My book is called The Oat Project. It's a memoir about sowing your wild oats late. It turned into a book because a bunch of people said, you should get drunk for at least once in your life at 37. You'll hear more about this, but this, you guys, this event is a grand experiment. I thought this would be happening in about 6 months to a year. It happened 9 days after the book launched. So I'm just going with it, and I hope we all have fun tonight. I have something to read. This whole thing is going to be really centered on words via interview and the word on the page. This page is, I opened it up because this has guided my life for the last few years, and I have written on it always, especially 2007, which is when I did the book and wrote the book. It's by Derek Walcott, and it's called Love After Love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Thank you, Sharon. That's really my aim. I hope to lead us all to take a little bite of our lives, a big, huge bite, if you so desire. First of all, I need to thank Smokebrush, Don Godey, Jeff, Callis, all the staff. Please eat and drink. They have a cheese plate that has artichoke dip and all sorts of yumminess on it. They have wine and beer, as you've probably figured out. So please get some food and enjoy. And then just open your hearts and hear the words. I am going to...
What's the name of this book?
Oh, thank you. Sharon is my mentor. Thank you, Sharon. This is Nights of Wild. I called it that because the Oat Project as a book and as a project and as a concept, and then thus this, kind of inhabits the space between Eat, Pray, Love. Some of you might know about that. A lady in her 30s goes off and gets to go to Italy and India and leave everything and find herself. And the bucket list, which, you get to do what you do at the end of your life because you don't care about what people think anymore, right? I think we often ignore the middle years. I'm 42. I did my book at 37 with 3 children, a then husband, and now friend. We ignore this space. We say, we shouldn't be wild. It's dangerous. We shouldn't take risks. It's dangerous. We should have insurance, and we should have, we shouldn't go outside on a rainy day. Not really, but, we focus on being safe instead of real. We focus on being safe instead of growing. And the Oat Project turned into, and I use that intentionally, I thought it was going to be stupid. gonna smoke a cigarette for the first time in my life. What can happen from that? And then I had people come up to me and say, you know, you're doing all these things, and I just signed up for real estate college because of you. This happened. Now, thank God she didn't remember that when she hated it, but blame me. But you know, it's these middle years, that I have unintentionally reinvigorated in my own life and hope that you guys and everyone will consider doing for themselves. Not so much even the middle years, just that space inside of ourselves that shuts down. The Nights of Wild. From here on out, I hope I get better at this. It's been a long time. From here on out, the last Saturday night of every month, here will be the Nights of Wild. It's going to be tied to the release of my book. I'm releasing it chapter by chapter. So since you guys are here, do you want to know what the next chapter is on April 28th, or do you want to be surprised? I'm going to be asking you guys questions.
Tell us.
Tell us.
Tell us.
Okay.
Yeah, tell us.
All right. The next one is going to be dealing with the difference between, well, when I read erotica for the first time, Anais Nin, I thought I knew a lot about sex because I had read Harlequins. It's not true. And so the next one is going to be interesting. I'm going to read from that chapter, and then the purpose is to investigate what it means to integrate the wild into our lives, just like I said. So I'm going to interview at least one person on stage for you who has successfully integrated the wild, whether it's in their corporate lives or their artistic lives or their mom lives. Who knows? You'll have to stay tuned for that. And then we're going to have readings from authors and poets consistently. I'm a part of a larger community of writers here, and that's brilliant. And it'll all center around that theme that comes out with the book. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, all right, just making sure. So, any questions?
Not yet.
Okay, all right. The last thanks that I need to give is to Deb Courtney and Ashley Crockett for being part of this grand experiment. Thank you. You're going to hear from them after the break. Now, I want you all to close your eyes. Please. So now I want you to think about the wildest thing you've ever done in your life. Okay, so now I want you to stand up. You can open your eyes. Okay, now move 5 feet left or right. Okay? Yeah. So now, with one word or one sentence, I would like you to turn to someone and tell them about what you thought about. You have 3 minutes. What's the wildest thing you've ever done? One word, one sentence, 2 sentences.
Because you're going to hear plenty
Some wild oats? Do they blow away if you ignore the urge to fling them wide? Do they fester like boils to be lanced? Run roots like bindweed, waiting underground for decades, then hitting the light to entangle a lifetime of roots, engulfing your proper plants row by row? In my 37th year, I began to wonder. This journey started with a conversation at a mom's Friday morning coffee group. After dropping kids off at school, where the parents were more liberal and open-minded about faith and life than anyone had ever known, we met at a Russian Orthodox coffee house. Our conversations ranged wide. Matryoshka dolls and iconographic paintings of grisly old saints watched over us as we talked not only about diapers and kids and husbands, but also about books and philosophy and even sex. They laughed, delighted rather than horrified, when I preemptively apologized if I ever tailgated them on the way to school. They seemed to like my intense, fast-driving personality, rather than finding me to be too much. One day, I told them of how a couple other friends had insisted that my self-understanding was incomplete because I had never gotten drunk. They exploded with questions. How had I arrived at 37, never having been drunk? Did I drink at all? Did I think it was wrong? I told them a bit about being a preacher's daughter. No movies or school dances allowed, let alone alcohol. How only a few weeks before, I had gotten tipsy on a glass of wine for the first time. How being out of control in any way was one of the roots of sin. They insisted that knowing how I was when I lost control was crucial to my inner growth, that I should get drunk with them at a party they were going to throw for me. I didn't get it, or even necessarily agree, but considering what they said, widened cracks that had begun to appear in my carefully cultivated life. Little did I know that planning a party, a simple party, with fellow moms would lead me to an entire summer of experimentation in my hometown, conservative, Christian-soaked Colorado Springs. By the end of 14 short weeks, I would see more debauchery, vice, and completely naked bodies than I could have imagined. I had even done things that I'd been told would lead me straight to hell, or misery, or both, including getting rip-roaring drunk. Way more than a party. At the next coffee group, we started planning the party. Again, just a party. They discussed the merits and disadvantages of rum, gin, vodka, beer, and wine. Someone said, no, don't drink tequila. Oh God, that was the worst hangover. They debated how fast I should get drunk, and if it counted if I didn't throw up. I cringed inside as they decided it should be a bar crawl right down Tejon Avenue in public. I played along, acting delighted to anticipate drinking in my hood of downtown. But I was petrified of looking like a fool in front of people I knew. Then Hillary asked, "What else have you not done, Jené?" "What do you mean?" I said. "Well, have you smoked weed?" she said. "You mean like marijuana?" I said. "Yes," she said, laughing. "Marijuana." "No," I said, horrified. "It's a drug." They were all belly laughing now. This was a surprise that they laughed at drugs. Confused, I held off judgment of my new friends. "Have you smoked a cigarette?" asked Erin. "No, yuck, I have asthma." I couldn't believe that she would do something so unhealthy. She seemed like a hippie, and I thought being healthy was practically a requirement. "Skinny dipped?" asked Beryl. "This body? Naked? In public?" No. I was still nursing my youngest son, toddling around our feet as they giggled. Though I had lost some weight from regularly walking, my pre-3 kids body was a distant memory. I tried to smile, but I squirmed instead. "Gone to a strip club? Seen titties, Jené?" asked Suzanne. They roared. "No." "Ever watched porn?" asked Sarah. "No, I'm married. I have sex?" That last part came out more like a question than a statement. I wondered if they had all watched those sorts of films, or even still did. A memory of naked girls dancing on a picnic table in a movie sneaked at my friend's house in junior high surfaced in my mind as they snickered. "Had role-play sex?" asked Beryl. "You mean like dressing up?" My mind stopped in shock that this page boy, redheaded, fair-skinned mom was asking me this. "Yes," she said in her pitch-perfect, matter-of-fact mom voice, "like schoolgirl versus Godzilla." I couldn't help but giggle. "No, definitely not." My eyes widened. "Wait, have you?" I thought, she's Lutheran. Do normal people do this? Are Lutherans normal? As the scope of my inexperience grew, so did their incredulity. My curiosity about drunkenness ballooned into wanting to experience a few normal wild oats. We started making a list of things I should have already done in my life. They wanted to do some things with me, to make it an adventure, to help me see what I'd missed, and have fun together over the summer. The list was long and varied and scared me spitless. Fear, fear, and more fear. This story might sound ridiculous. Your sowing wild oats may have ended in your 20s, after you fucked up enough to know your boundaries, what you liked and disliked. Getting drunk isn't a big deal, right? Except for me, even at 37 years old, it still was. In my world, as a preacher's daughter in a conservative Christian denomination, being out of control in any way was forbidden, avoided at all costs. Wild wasn't simply testing the bounds of propriety or law, it was sin, rebellion against God. I was to seek God's presence and perfect will with each and every breath. Though my parents weren't oppressively restrictive, our church and community pounded fear into me. Go out into the world and I might wreck my car while drunk, or get a sexual disease or cancer from instantly addictive cigarettes. But worse, I'd harm my spiritual life, potentially doomed to hell, separated from God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit for eternity. Thinking about wildish things meant I was spiritually weak. Doing them was to flirt with hell itself. I'm not saying I hadn't experienced life, and I certainly wasn't yearning to reclaim my youth. I'd lived all over the US, married, and had sex, in that order, had 3 children, friends, a community, and a burgeoning writing career. I had quit going to church several years before, but my everyday life was much the same as when I went regularly. I no longer believed in the sin of drinking, but getting drunk was unthinkable. My husband didn't drink, and only once or twice had I had something that went out with friends. So at its heart, my life was great. But in the midst of these joys, weekly panic attacks had plagued me for years, triggered by deep fear of failure, death, and risk. In church or out, I was still afraid. Why had lifelong faith not solved this? Why had ditching church not helped either? What if I had turned my back on real life by avoiding pain and risk as I was taught? And worse, what if I was teaching my children fear and avoidance as habits? You guys good?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
All right. Just start going like this. If you're thirsty or something, all right? The box. Excuse me, I don't do it. For a few years before this, I had begun to see that the box in which I had grown up still walled me in, that I was defined by its habits and its judgments. Realizing this began in earnest in 2005, my 7th year of marriage. I was pregnant with our 3rd child and horny as hell. This wasn't unusual, even when not pregnant, but I seemed more amped up than ever before. My husband, Jack, was tired from his job, from being a parent to young children, and wasn't as interested in sex as my intense self was. His drive had never equaled my own. I had been a virgin at 28 when we married. I shall not recommend waiting to my children. But we did have sex, more often than many, I've since learned. I always wanted more. Wanted him to want me more, and was suddenly wanting all of it, even more than usual. I didn't masturbate either. I was married, after all, supposed to be having actual sex, not sex in my head with my own fingers. I'd been taught that any sexual activity that wasn't with your spouse, including yourself, was fornication. So instead, I read racy books. I love these books. I started with Janet Ivanovich's One for the Money. She blew my mind in the first chapter with her graphic description of fingering, the main character's first sexual experience. I was offended by it, but kept reading. Hooked on the characters, coming to see them all as mostly normal after a few chapters. Then came the oral sex. I stopped, confused. Was oral sex normal for everyday people? I put off thinking about it, chalked it up to being normal for pulp fiction, and plowed through 1 book a day, checking out 3 or 4 at a time in the library. I read really fast. Next up was Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Again, I found myself reading an oral sex scene in which Claire, the main character, a strong, intelligent woman with whom I identified, demurred. Jamie, one of fiction's most appealing men, and I know I do this every time, but I just need to stop here and think about Jamie, because seriously. Wow. I don't know who would play him in a movie, I swear. I have no idea who would come up with that. So Jamie, one of fiction's most appealing men, laughed at her squeamishness and pleasured her right through it, comparing it to natural animal drive, saying that he liked doing it, smelling and tasting her everywhere, even down there. I was deeply confused. These characters Gabaldon created were supposed to be realistic. This was high-quality historical fiction, not pulp. If this was normal for romantic relationships, why had I never known that oral sex was okay? When I had gone back to school a few months before, studying at a local coffee shop, staffed by mostly guys, Jack, my husband, had joked, "Please have your little boyfriends, they take the pressure off of me." He didn't mean for me to actually do anything with other men. He was my best friend. But I had never stopped having more guys than gals as friends, had been that way my whole life. He disdained society's typical reaction to this. "Why should I be afraid you'll sleep with your guy friends when you could just as easily sleep with your girlfriends?" he would say. However, he consistently, though jokingly, disdained how intense I was, especially about how often I wanted sex, how much I liked to touch and be touched. I initiated physicality far more than he did, and I had been trying so very hard, for so very long, to not mind his words and attitude. trying to make myself less. I knew he loved me, but he simply wasn't a demonstrative person. Though I knew this back then, when I was still insecure, I figured he didn't reach for me because I wasn't attractive enough. You see, I had been taught to not ask others to change, that the unselfish route was to change myself, to find the fault inside me for messed up situations. But this method no longer felt fair, or even workable. And now before me, in books that millions had read and loved, I discovered that for once, I wasn't the unusual one, that my husband might be the one who needed to change, at least according to the norm. Gabaldon's words plunged me into a profound longing for Jack to want to know my body, just like fictional Jamie wanted to know Claire's. Every nook and cranny, explored and familiar. I yearned for him to be like a native in the country of my body, instead of a tourist. So, after reading Outlander again, thinking the whole problem was simply a lack of knowledge, I mustered the courage to ask Jack about oral sex. My discomfort with talking about sex, kind of present even now, years later, this is practice, made me stutter, hesitate, and blush. So, I have a question for you. Yeah, he said. So, did you know that, I was reading in these books, the ones I've been getting from the library, the gardening books? No. The romances, and that one about Scotland, I said. Okay, what about them? He said. So, in all of them, in all of them, in fact, the characters do, well, the writer treats oral sex like it's just normal, I rushed on, and it's like something everyone does, part of knowing each other, and I was wondering if you thought that and knew that. Yeah, I did. And with that, so began the end of my marriage. I tried so very hard, deep inside myself, to not feel cheated. I refused to let even the thought enter my brain, though the feeling coursed through me. I felt like screaming, but I didn't. You did? Yeah, why? Well, as I swallowed and took a big breath, why haven't we done that? He shrugged. I don't know. I felt like crying, but I wouldn't. My jaw clenched, but I didn't show it. I kept my tone light and even a little playful. Well, do you want to? Want to what? Try it. See what it's like. I held my breath, though I didn't realize it at the time. Sure. Okay, I said. Though I knew that sure was what he said when he didn't really agree or want to do something, off I went. This was something about which I knew only what I'd read in those books. Jack didn't seem to know much or didn't want to talk about it, so clearly research was in order. This was my role, as I had done with every new need in our marriage, from buying a washing machine to finding help to parent our spirited children. I emailed links and information to Jack. Then we talked about what I found and made the decision together. So I started as usual. I Googled it. I typed in oral sex, and my jaw dropped. Good Lord. My gas-permeable contacts dried out as I didn't blink for a while. My eyes were very wide, though I found solid, specific information on sites like AskMen.com. It floated in a sea of porn. Still, I found enough fascinating information from biological to psychological that I felt like a kid in a candy shop. So much stuff to make me try. Jack never looked at what I sent. I didn't harp. I have plenty of flaws, but nagging isn't one. I brought it up that week, and he said he hadn't had time. A few days later, he hadn't yet found the time, so I stopped sending him links, waiting for him to mention what he'd already received. I thought maybe he was going to surprise me with action. A few weeks later, he still hadn't read anything. I had asked twice, and I tried to stop hoping. A few months later, I gave him the Kama Sutra for Christmas, thinking maybe he hadn't been interested because all the information had been online. He looked happy enough to receive it as he tore off the wrapping paper, laughing knowingly, seeming to even flirt a little. I read it that week, in one ecstatic night, and then placed it on a side table. Dust formed on and around it, and he never picked it up. To my knowledge, and it is to my knowledge, he never read anything. He did try oral sex a couple of times, but what I had read colored my perception of it, and it was clear that he didn't know what I did. Since learning a little more about it over the last few years, my inexperience was a handicap for both of us. I didn't know enough to consider that he may have felt threatened by the results of my research. But back then, in that moment, in the context of years of struggling to get closer to him, it was just one more way he was not turning towards me. Did this bother me? Of course. Did I think it was an indication of a deeper problem in our marriage? Yeah. But though I had started to consider that it might be more his problem, my instinct was still to think that he had this difficulty because I was too intense. I wanted too much, felt too much, noticed too much, analyzed too much. Though I had begun to resent his attitude, I felt Jack was right to disdain this flaw in me. I had been admonished for it all my life. He simply confirmed it. This was the box. Where we were as a couple, where I was as a person. Its walls were built from the thick, stony fear of conservative evangelical culture, of thinking from 4th grade on that I was damned for masturbating almost every night, damned for wanting to do so in marriage, damned for being so sexual, and generally too damn much. I was bound. And though I had judged myself by those chains for years, they were finally becoming visible. Was I having a midlife crisis? No. Though the results of this project certainly brought one on. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was experiencing the natural consequences of no longer believing in the structure of my faith amidst a fracturing marriage. If the forbiddens that had guided me since I was born had become more like a prison than a safety net, then it was time to test them. What better way than to get drunk? Let's stand up for a minute. How are you guys doing? I can't really see you. Are you falling asleep yet? Okay, all right. What time is it, somebody? 10 to 8. 10 to 8. All right. You want to hear how it started and then we'll take a break? Okay. This has almost nothing to do with the inside of me. It's, fun. All right. The Oak Council. I asked 12 girlfriends. Shall I point the ones that are here out? Yes. Raise your hand. Yes, please. Yeah. Raise your hand. That's one. Right. Okay. I asked 12 girlfriends, mostly moms, most from the Friday Coffee Group, to walk the journey with me, to be my Oak Council. I expected to find a rich source of information and emotional assurance, as in reassuring me that I wouldn't die or go to hell. Even as I thought the list was frivolous, I knew myself to be a chicken. I hoped they would help me finalize the list, tell me how to do each task, and do at least one with me. I'd known some a long time, others less, and looked forward to just fun. I'd never had many female friends, but in the last few years I had grown closer to some wonderful women. Thank you, Sue. Watching my mother, a pastor's wife, navigate the churning, uncertain waters of female relationships in a church setting, often becoming a target, ignored, sometimes loved, cemented in me her wariness of women in groups. So finding these ladies felt a little risky, and also like discovering my lost tribe. They ranged in belief from free thinker, atheist, to born-again Christian. My former conventional Christian self would have told me to rely solely upon Christian friends for spiritual guidance, for what could be a very risky plan. But no longer. I knew I needed the input of all types. I love that. Oh, I love the train. Okay. Even knowing that I needed the input, I hit a snag. Why didn't I feel a moral check regarding these things? I had properly ignored the entire world for most of my life, and now, having left the church 7 years before, I was about to immerse myself in the secular, hell-bound world from which I was supposed to flee. What had happened to me? I contacted everyone to find a time we could kick off with lunch at a favorite restaurant. Of the 12, only Suzanne, Erin, Diana, and Stella showed up. Some of the rest didn't even get back with me, and a couple of them said they'd come but didn't show. I was disappointed, but I chalked it up to end of school and beginning of summer busyness. I brought a list of 42 options and asked them, what's not on the list that should and should not be? Should they be divided into young and older tasks? How should I do them? One of each type per week? Should they be done in any specific order? Are there any I should do all on my own? Last, I also asked them which one or more they would like to do with me. Conversation went like this. So, what kind of gay bar are you going to? Asked Stella. There are different kinds, I said. Stella doubled over, laughing. Yes, Jené, she said. She's a lesbian, the only one I knew, a college senior, and was my kid's babysitter. Like what? Well, there are bars for gay men, lesbian bars, bars for both, all kinds, said Erin. So what sort should I go to? They disagreed. A lesbian bar. All of them. Diana hadn't said a word yet. Will there be dancing? I said. Please let there be dancing, I thought. Sometimes, but definitely drinking. Will I get hit on? If you want to be. Stella smirked as she said this. Do you think I have to get hit on to really immerse? Only if you want to get hit on. Don't do it just for the book, Stella said. Should I try to kiss a girl? No, that should not be for the book, Stella said. I was surprised. You should kiss a girl. You should kiss anyone because you want to kiss them, not for a project. Okay. You don't have shoplifting on here, Jené, Suzanne said, like she's caught me. I've already done that, actually, I said, cocking my eyebrow at her. Really? Glee lit up their faces. When? What did you do? I was 4, and their laughter rang through the restaurant. That doesn't count. Come on, Jené. No, I said. Hear me out. Suzanne crossed her arms, still laughing. I was 4 when Bubble Yum came out. I wanted some, but we were totally bored. I went with my parents to a store, and in the hardware section, I saw a pack of Bubble Yum sitting on a shelf next to a shovel. I put it in my pockets. When we got to the car, I sat in the back seat. I bent over and put the pack of gum on the floor, under the driver's seat. Then, when we were a little over halfway home, I pretended to drop a pen, bent over to pick it up, and cried, "Oh, look what I found," holding up the gum. My mom said, "Just be sure to share it with your brother." Jason wasn't older than 2. Okay, I said. So I got my gum. I didn't tell them, my parents, that I had stolen it until I was 14 and we'd moved 3 times to 3 different states. Suzanne was open-mouthed. She had a 4-year-old at home. You know, she said, I think that actually counts. They all nodded with her grinning. I told you, I said. You were so devious, Erin said, looking at me as though reassessing me. Yeah, I said. Kind of freaks me out now, though, with a 4-year-old of my own. I clinked water glasses with Suzanne, toasting her and my 4-year-olds. They didn't want to cut anything on the list I brought. I could see this project stretching into years. I think you should take your worst fear and face it, said Erin. Like, you fear death. So you should do something like jumping out of an airplane. But that's not the point, I said. It's to sow wild oats, not to face fears. She got the point much earlier than I did. We decided to do the tasks together over the upcoming summer. 14 weeks and settled on a twofold approach. Half the things they wanted me to do were commonly done between the ages of 15 and 25. Half the things they considered exotic or deserved luxuries by most American women. I was not allowed to combine them. I couldn't get drunk for courage. I had to face each task on its own. After heated discussion and debates, and a conflict that became the beginning of the end of a few friendships, the oat list was final. That's not the whole prologue, but I'm not going to go on anymore because I think we should go get something to eat and drink. Thank you for being an amazing audience and listening. Cheese plates, beer and wine, these great seaweed chips, all back there. Smokebrush is allowing me to use this space free of charge, except for what you buy over there. So please patronize them and come hungrier next month, okay? 10 or 15 minutes and then we'll get going again. Are you all ready?
Yes.
For much less of me. Again, thank you. Thank you for ordering all this stuff from everyone. The next person up here is my friend Deb Courtney. She is the owner of Courtney Literary. It's a small publisher in town. And I have known her for a very long time. She is the opposite of me. She did all of these things when she was young. We were talking about this at the intermission. And she didn't think about them really. Although that's not true because she analyzes everything. So she did think about them, which you'll hear more about. But as I was talking with a couple of you, you've had the experience where you don't really think about it, you just do wild things. Deb was not like that, or was. Both. Yeah. She's going to come up here and read a story, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I know you. I read it. Thank you. Okay, go.
Yeah, so unlike Jené, I did do most of these things when I was young, and I still should have known better. This is called 3 Girls, 2 Boys, and a Red Camaro. And I would just like to say, don't buy your 19-year-old a red Camaro. It's a bad decision.
Nice.
Until I was 16, I was an introverted, buck-toothed collaboration between intellect and gawkiness. Too tall, too clumsy, too weird for a world that I could not relate to. When I was 13, my mother said, "Deb, you will never have any friends unless you find a way to be that allows you to connect with the world, that allows people to see you for all that you are, not just your brain." And so I set out to analyze the world and transform myself into someone who fit in. The ugly duckling to swan part was not so hard. Contact lenses, braces, some lessons in applying makeup, decent haircut. But my inner transformation was much more painful and difficult. At 16, boys finally discovered the new exterior, and they were fond of it. Even so, my interior remained analytical, sneaking around and assessing people's intentions, including my own. 3 years later, at 19, I had settled into myself, become more used to being a person that others wanted to be around. But it was still difficult to be in the moment. I was still analyzing everything, but I was getting there. And then, my parents gave me a brand new red Camaro, which came with a weekend at the beach. This is a very bad decision if you have children, by the way. Here's how that weekend started. Liquid sunshine bathed the 2 boys in a haze of Florida gold. They were statues in low-slung jeans and flip-flops, with their thumbs hung lazily into the oncoming traffic. A request and an invitation. In the passenger seat of my car, Amy drew a quick breath. She had seen them as well. "Don't even think about it," I said. And she turned to me, trouble in a strawberry blonde package, her eyes deceptively innocent and as wide as she could make them, imploring. "No," I said. Kit popped her head forward from the back seat and caught sight of the boys as we drove past them. "Oh," she said, "we're not stopping." "You're no fun," said Amy. "3 days of freedom, beach, this car, you are no fun." I sighed, and I hit the brakes. Kit squealed in approval, and Amy smiled. Amy could always get me that way, and as the car slowed, I felt the first tentacles of bad judgment grasp hold of me. We'd made a pact that this would be a girls-only weekend. We would engage in only moderately bad behavior and nothing worse. Here's how far we'd gotten. Number 1, check into condo. Number 2, grocery store. Number 3, liquor store. Number 4, picking up hitchhikers. I sighed again. "Look, I made my mother one promise. No guys in the condo. Let's try to keep that one." The car came to a full stop, Amy still grinning. Innocent, my ass. And of course, this exact behavior is why we were friends. I had known from the moment we settled our plans for the weekend that the best case scenario was that no one got arrested, or if we did, that I somehow made bail without my mother finding out. I grinned back. "Fucker, shut up and let me do the talking." It was almost 90 degrees and we had the windows down to let the salty Gulf air flow over us. I wondered if I looked okay, if my skin was shiny with sweat, or if I looked fresh and impeccably cool, the sort of girl who was always in control and spontaneous. I pushed my sunglasses to the top of my head, and then I thought that might look dorky. And then it was too late because they were almost to the car, and I put the grin back on my face, hoping it looked more real than it felt. But oh yeah, those boys were grinning too as they came to the driver's window, and their smiles got wider as they realized they'd hit the hitchhiker jackpot. 3 19-year-old girls in a brand new red Camaro. I smirked, analyzing, knowing they'd probably been worried the driver was a man in his 40s or some kind of axe murderer. "Hey," said one, "what's up?" He was clearly trying for casual, and through many such interactions, I'd come to understand how boys use bravado as a tool, as uncertain as me, having to work just as hard to be cool, and I felt more in control already. Still in a halo of sun up close, though perfection waned a bit, a zit, imperfect teeth. And they were a study in contrasts, one as light as the other was dark. Thick honey hair brushed messily from his face, crooked once broken nose, his white wife beater hugging muscles made lean and hard from yard work or construction. He rested his hand lightly on the frame of the car. For a moment, I could not take my eyes from the veins that ran beneath the hardness of his forearm and the skin. His companion was Latino, maybe Cuban, Puerto Rican, and just as hard, but with longer, almost black hair. And his almost black eyes were intent and laughing at me. "Oh, you know, we're just driving along," I said, trying for saucy. Trying for just the right note. Amy and Kit snickered, waiting. The blonde leaned down and looked me in the eyes. "Any particular destination in mind?" And I thought, oh, you're the boy my mother warned me about. In that second, I finally felt something a little like judgment kick in. Of course it would kick in now. After I pulled over, and after I chatted up the hitchhikers who would probably kidnap, rape, and kill us. I paused, a moment too long, and the dark one raised an eyebrow at me, a question, like he was asking me, "Do you really have the balls to pick us up?" And then he winked. He winked, like we were sharing some private joke. A frisson of fear fluttered through my stomach. No, wait, not my stomach. Not fear, not exactly. It was a little bit of fear, a little charge of excitement, and it was a little lower than my stomach. I smiled slowly, and I winked back. My friends could not see my face as I did it, so it was a secret. mine and his. Yeah, I winked back. They were both the boys my mother warned me about. But I really hadn't understood the warning until now. Now it made perfect sense. In this world, there are some boys we do not need to be warned about, and some we do. And now I knew the difference. And I realized in that moment that I was the kind of girl who kind of liked the sort of boy one needed to be warned about. I turned and nodded to Amy, but she was already out of the car. I guess we're giving you boys a ride, I said. And then I paused, realizing as those words left my mouth that they could be taken in a way that I had not meant them. Or at least I didn't think I had meant them. And I felt a flush creep across my cheeks, and I lowered my sunglasses to hide my eyes as the two climbed into the back seat. So, I said, turning to Golden Boy as he sat. I did not give his darker friend a single glance, knowing I would blush even more if I met those laughing eyes. Where to? Of course. They were staying in a shithole 18 miles down the beach in Clearwater. Of course. They were meeting friends there later. And of course they thought they might like to hang out with us, especially after they found out we were staying on North Reddington and had a car full of food and beer and cheap rum. Lee and Tomas, the blonde and the Cuban, in my suddenly stupid car, which had only moments before seemed like the most perfect gift ever, but now struck me as ridiculous, to attention-seeking. And what the hell was I supposed to do now? Drive them to their place? Invite them to ours? Protocol called for girls' confab at the very least, preferably in a bathroom with giggling and posturing and calling your dibs. But this was not an option. As the driver, the decision as to what to do with our new friends rested only with me. And damn that Tomas, I could feel him looking at me from the back seat, gauging me, sizing me up, daring me. Yeah, so we'll take you to your hotel, I said. You can catch up with us later if you want. Those words came out of my mouth. Only they weren't my words at all. My mother had entered the car via my brain and made a sensible decision for me. Holy shit. Amy gave me a shocked stare, but thankfully didn't call me out on it. And as I pulled away from the curb, I mentally told my mother to get the hell out of my head. When I look back now, and I try to understand why I said what I said at that moment, I can only come up with this. The excitement I felt with the taboo of picking up two attractive hitchhikers was not kosher, was somehow illegal. Though I was breaking no specifically stated rules, I was also well aware that boys in the car was a single step on a journey that could end up with boys in the room. And in that moment, I became the voice of caution inside myself, which was the voice of my mother. Of course, this story doesn't end with that. If it did, it might be a cute but cautionary tale of three girls who avoided a terrible fate, who maybe a few days later saw a news report about escaped bank robbers or murderers, recognized what a close call they'd had with something terrible, and swore never again to stray off the straight and narrow. But this is not that story. Hell no. I banished my mother's voice from my head and went about my business. And of course, they showed back up later that day. Tomas waved the bottle of horrific store-brand rum and reached for my hand. It was the second bottle. We'd stopped mixing it with anything when the cola ran out. Now, Kit, Tomas, Lee, and I were wandering down the beach, taking turns drinking from the bottle, playing pool hop. The object of pool hop is to jump into as many private resort pools as possible after hours. To play, one drinks a whole lot, walks down the beach, and then finds gates left unlocked or fences low enough to climb. The more difficult it is to access the pool, or the more likely it is that a security guard is around, the better the pool. There were no points, there was no winner, but the thrill and the threat of very few repercussions, chased away by a guard maybe a ticket for an open bottle since we were all legal drinking age. And then Tomas took my hand. We were both dripping from the last pool. No towels, no shoes, Just bathing suits, bodies, sand, rum, and moonlight. Kitten Lee had run a bit down the beach, and Tomas pulled me close. He offered the bottle, and I shook my head. I had had too much already, and I knew he was going to kiss me, and there would be plenty of rum on his lips. He loosed my hand and reached behind my neck and pulled my face in, and the kiss, laced with rum, was so soft and so sweet, I thought I might die for it. We completely lost Kitten Lee on the beach, and then crossed the street to a private marina and found ourselves somehow, I don't know how, in a boat. There was kissing and laughter and rocking, and the indoor-outdoor carpet chafing my back, and no thought of stopping, and we were wrapped around each other, and the day had reached the promised conclusion of those earlier winks in the sunshine. And then it occurred to me that I was very likely having a one-night stand. New territory. I opened my eyes and I saw him staring down at me, dark eyes, intent. No laughter there now, just tenderness and lust. What? He said, concerned. I won't ever see you again, will I? It's unlikely, he said, not unkindly. Is that okay? Are you okay? I bit my lip. Was I okay? I thought of how awkward it would be to see him in the morning, when there was no more alcohol, when pool hop no longer seemed brilliant and daring, when I couldn't remember why we laughed so hard, or why it seemed a good idea to get together in the first place. And I was relieved that I got to let this moment stand in its absolutely absurd, drunken perfection. I am, I said. I'm okay. And he smiled, and I smiled, and he kissed me again. The next day, Amy, Kit, and I were in the car. We were painfully and blissfully hungover, heading to play miniature golf, a nice tame activity that all of our parents would approve of. We'd already rehashed the events of the previous evening and would do so again over and over and over, and we thought ourselves brilliant. We were amazed with our ability to bend and break rules and live our lives out loud with no boundaries. But today's speed, miniature golf. I reflected as I drove on having pushed my own boundaries and having gone just a bit wild without getting caught or having suffered any apparent repercussions. And I exulted in being the sort of girl who could take that all in stride. At the same time, I exulted in having followed my mother's injunction to a T. No boys in the condo. I managed to avoid her second greatest fear, which was sex in the Camaro. And I could totally look her in the eyes and not lie about these things, as long as I kept my back covered for a few days to hide the carpet burn. All would be well. Today, now, I realize what an absolute idiot I was. I look back in wonder. I feared all the wrong things. I was more terrified of getting caught by my mother than I was of picking up a stranger, trespassing, fucking a stranger in another stranger's boat. And I'm in awe today of my ability to simultaneously make decisions I knew were not wise, even while keenly aware of just how unwise they were. Is part of me still that awkward 13-year-old girl? My friends, Jené, would say yes. I would say yes. And that is the part of me, a 13-year-old, who was secretly pleased at the entire memory, at the audacity of my 19-year-old self, that I got to be the girl with the red Camaro, and that I still get to be me, her, me, every day.
So, you know, did the boat overturn and stuff? And you, Deb. I often wonder, like, if I had actually done something when I was 19, what would have happened? I didn't. I didn't even kiss in the fucking dark room. I was a photographer, and I didn't kiss in the dark room. It's ridiculous. Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Our next person up here is the incomparable Ashley Crockett. Well-known poet, well-known raconteur. Kidding, rabble-rouser.
Yes, sir.
And she's going to read for us some poetry, which I think might be some of the wildest words in existence. So thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
I'm going to take one of these.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you both. I'm delighted to be part of this. And I have to say, first, by way of excusing Jené, she didn't vet any of my poems. I did, however, read.
Walk on the outside.
I read her the first chapter. And I have to say that what was interesting for me is that I had a big life change around the age of 35, and I've spent the last 20 years shutting down who I was. And so this stuff is going to sound a little bit, it comes from my child voice and who I was as a child. So I'll just blaze on, okay? And if you need to, get the hook out. All right. This first one is called Titless Tomboy. My first love was named Coco, the Shetland pony my father gave me 2 weeks before my 7th birthday, in exchange for an apology for being rude to Aunt Edie. He had not been broken. We fought each other every day. He bucked, shied, tried to scrape me off on scrub oak, once cantered smoothly through the park, then jerked to a stop and slammed his head into a trash barrel filled with fragrant cantaloupe rinds. I jumped him over the hunter's course. When he refused, wrestled until he leapt, worried my parents past dark. I sawed at his mouth with snaffle bit, gained strong arms and chest to match his cunning will. Then my breasts budded, stole my tomboy ways, ended freedom of innocent days. No, you don't clap, don't clap. So there's an arc on this. Okay, this is called Pagan Rebel Heart. My childhood windows faced south and west. I looked through juniper and lilac at my mountains. At daybreak, the red granite glowed as if still molten. I could see the barn and the horses when they came for water. Around the house, each sister's apple tree budded. Greening with the rest, I watched the pear tree, the peach, and the weeping white birch. Spring was all lavender and green. It rained every afternoon at tea time, 20 minutes through sunshine, just enough to lift the growing things and scent the air with ozone. Lilac flowers pressed the windows among huge heart-shaped leaves. If you fold one in half and pull it tight, you can make a whistle. When I got sent to my room, I'd lock the door, climb out my window, and go riding on my pony. A secret, glorious escape into my pines, to anemones, tender wild asparagus clustered under mountain mahogany, scrub oak, and the astringent smell of sage. So, onward. This is recreation. Little ode to the sensual. Spring has thrown itself down my throat and turned into a honey song, dancing rainbows on my tongue. The sun rises on my breasts, pouring its warmth down between into my belly, radiating from the infinite core, rolls down my legs in glistening rivulets, imprisoned by sunlight, metamorphosis into gold. Spring, this is the time of my morning. Okay? Now, we're gonna move a little bit, move on. Community college. He took me for a spin between classes, impressed by his convertible Corvette. We had sex in the West Side graveyard, hidden behind the little mound. Why not his place or mine, somewhere private? I must have been living at home again, pretending to go to school, killing time until I could figure some move. We made love in a treehouse as big as a bedroom in someone's backyard downtown, moonlight streaming onto us through its square, painless openings. I visited him in the hospital after his leg got cut off by a coil of rope between two Louisiana barges. Then we lost track. My husband doesn't know the story. We walked the bike path with our dogs, cut across the alleys and backsides of houses on reclaimed railroad line, still neighborhoods of unpretentious folks on the wrong side of the tracks. Someone has a big tree house like the remembered one. Below, in a yard full of junk, an orange shell of a Porsche, a faded yellow muscle car slowly surrendered to time. Every sideways glance, I wonder if my old driver lives there. But I'll probably never go around front and ring the bell. Okay. And this is another seven deadly sin kind of thing. Okay? It's called Klingon Payback. Green grubs glide down silk threads, stealth invaders disguised as twists of lime for summer tonics and martinis. Kite from the branching ash canopy they've mouthed into sloppy lace. Now set to scallop edges of lilac leaves, much polka dots of nothingness through hollyhock's elephantine ears. But worst of all, these glorified worms chew my untended garden of wild rose. They twirl new leaves to nest themselves, defoliate the quickening twigs, excrete shit white webs on the buds. I offer a few on the altar of the hive, but disinterested bees won't partake. I scrape a mud wasp's grout from stucco and find it stuffed with these squirming pests. I get a predator's wicked inkling. Drop the fat bastards into hot oil. How disappointing to discover the taste of revenge is just, well, sort of green. Okay, here's just a little break. Or, no, I'll give you a break. Here's another little nature ode. Vestige. Chimney ivy spreads snaky tendrils, unpruned and wanton, across brickwork, slinks down window wells, blocks the few oblique sunrays, tries to push its way through jealousy window openings, gets through a hidden corner of the sunroom. Stately delphinium, iris, and roses parade the southern border. Let a less grand hollyhock sentinel patio steps where drain pipes relieve themselves on the lawn. In spring, the snake disquiets us. We women, with our naive primal fears, less innocent than Eve, already know danger when we see it, yet forget this garden garter harms none. She observed, he thinks he's all concealed, while only his head's under the hollyhock leaf, and the rest of him takes heat from sun and soil. Now that the conversation has started, we come to expect the serpent, have found golden lace of molted scales intact, See how it slid into new beauty, wriggled through its own mouth, and discarded an old self, left behind a transparent trace of its spirit. By midsummer, we anticipate him, dozing by brick step, no longer jump away from his yellow stripe. But not that one will penetrate, get through a crack, a pipe, packed earth, lay a nest in the basement, full of raveled, squirming strings the frightened maid would have to kill. By fall, all snake evidence disappears to other earth, except when I find a wooden pole, long separated from its desk, stuffed in a concrete crack. It shines where shed snakeskin adheres, traces of wide belly scales, that last 2 inches of tail skin curled and stuck to the brass knob. I carry the pole with me. I can see the maid tossing whatever came to hand to scare him off, or sticking the wood to block the hole in the wall. Can imagine the indifferent snake sliding past against the knob with both difficulty and grace, sloughing off his final scaly taper. Okay. Now,
Yeah, go there.
all right, can I keep it? Well, okay, we'll go back. This is called unrest. A perfectly natural reason for eyelids flying open at 4 a.m. might be a bloating bladder, a dive in sugar levels, a gnawing in the belly. It was his wetness that woke me, sex with the familiar stranger, whose jism is the devil's own cold grease. Too many years of waking in pools of blood, hell getting the stains out of sheets, easier to train myself to wake before an accident. I used to cherish our Nirvana sex, but he nickeled a hole in my trust, like a stocking run that panels its way up the thigh, leaving weak web in its wake. The piston mechanics of sex call for lubrication, inside the hip joints, if nowhere else. And a slow hand begets other juices. It takes a soft lingering to surface their musk. This unconscious sex in the dark without prelude seemed like spraying WD-40 on a squeaky door when the can was empty, working the hinges a few times to ensure the relief of silence. I'm tired of his chilling ooze. I hide a white nylon scarf under my pillow, each end knotted like a garrote. Okay, so you guys, I'm gonna have to just really divert here for a second. This is called Third Amendment gifts. This is from back in the day. The Bob God, another story, brought me a cock several weeks back. He works in mysterious ways. Why he wants to grace me with a flesh-colored facsimile 10 times bigger than his own, seriously. Or put it beside me, fake veins, wire reinforcements, and all, dumbfounds me. Think he'd come up short. To top it off, he let me take it home. Now I've got my own big dick. Don't need the other kind anymore. The nature-made type, power-operated by remote asshole. Reminds me of the joke about the elephant, the ant, and the Mercedes. Punchline, if you've got a Mercedes, you don't need a big dick. What got me going on this was my therapist saying, sounds like a lot of trouble to go through for a couple of orgasms you could give yourself. I see how the game is about power, money, security, and ownership, and what I think I have to give up to get X. How well I've learned the balm and band-aid of sex. And the battered, wounded woman soul in me sacrifices the peace to keep the peace, hiding the craziness. Coming is in my head. I discovered permission while his back was turned, without touching or cogs, live or otherwise. So, let's see, we're almost done here. Now, this is probably an area you haven't explored before. But this is called white empty, or white empty. Why the late night calls and the gaps in the lines get me going, I'll never know. But I get in the car and go. Wind chills my brain. It doesn't matter. I'm not the one driving myself to you. After we've ground our passions into tiny grains, the wheels stop spinning. We stop rolling, empty. A broken jet trail glows, backlit by the dawn. Now, for a little levity, here's a pastime in the park. There's a lot of baloney in the Bois de Boulogne. They're standing their ground. Parisian prostitutes, Brazilian transvestites, posing by the curb, dipping in cars, grabbing them down, shifting down gears, grabbing them by the ears. So when you're lonely, honey, take a spin with your money. If you're last in line, it can still be funny and not a waste of a dime. There's plenty of baloney in the Bois de Boulogne. Now, here's the last one I think I brought tonight. This is one that I wrote in the not so distant past, and it has to do with that idea of how in relationships we can be present to each other or not. And your line about another instance where your husband didn't turn toward you. So here we go. Once again, you turn away, roll your freckled wall at me. Leave me to stare at your once beloved constellations of moles, untouchable as sky. I try to connect the dots that can't make sense of random speckles or reason marbles wholeness. I am still molten, made of more mutable stuff. Leave me unheard in wilderness. I can no more offer gardens, no taproot beneath my xeriscaped mounds, no dormant bulbs. I am scorched earth, my furrows erased, rain traces on a gravel street. Roll away. Leave me my dry ravines, my endless desert. Let me judge if your cratered moonscape has potential for life. Leave me gauge what hardens between us, the depth of our sludge, when to stop dowsing for warmth. I promise wilder stuff later.
Yes. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
So we started a little late this time. Next time we'll start earlier. Not sure how we are on time. Would you guys like to hear just a little of the marijuana chapter, or would you like to go? Let's go. Yeah,
It's 9.
Yeah, it's 9. So, theoatproject.com is where you can buy the marijuana chapter and the cigarette chapter and the prologue. And please take a card by the sign-up sheet. I have one more thing I want you to do. Okay? Everyone close your eyes again. Quietly.
Just do it.
Yeah, close your eyes. And now, I want you to think about the wildest thing you've always wanted to do and never have. And now I want you to imagine how a piece of that can work itself into your life today. And that's your homework. I want to hear about it, whether you email me, whether you write a story if you're a writer, or a poem if you're a poet, or a song if you're a songwriter.
Or an anonymous email.
Or an anonymous email to me, that's fine. And I would love to hear about those next time. Does anyone have any questions? Are we good? We're good. Thank you so much for coming, for being part of this sort of, again, grand experiment. And the next one will be the last Saturday night in April. I believe it's April 28th. For those, if you weren't here when I said this before, it will be centered around the theme of the difference between erotica and harlequins, and Eisner in particular, and harlequins. And I will read from that new release with other guests as well. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Deb. And thank you, Smokebrush. Okay. The first and second adventures are smoking marijuana and smoking a cigarette. One of my harebrained ideas is to have excursions afterwards.
Field trip.
So if anyone would like to go to Rendezvous with me and smoke a cigar, I've only done it once, and so I have done this. It's in the chapter actually. But if you never have and you've seen it on TV and movies and wondered what that felt like, because that paper tastes really good, I'm just saying. I can see why they lick it all the time. You're welcome to join me and let me know afterwards, and we'll go and we'll hang out and smoke a cigar. So that's it. Thank you.